reptiles today. We're talking about their adaptations. We're also going to talk about the interconnectedness they have with the environment and the habitat that they live in, and the importance and role that they play in our environment. Okay? So for the sake of time, reptiles are a group of animals that are different than a lot of other animal groups. There are 5 vertebrate groups: mammals, reptiles, amphibians, birds, and fish. Well, reptiles are different than all the other ones, because, well, not all of them, but they share some characteristics. But the main thing about reptiles is they're cold-blooded or ectothermic animals, which means they cannot control their body temperature. And that's pretty difficult for an animal this time of year, being that it's so cold, having to, the inability to thermoregulate or change the body temperature and warm up is opposed to the big problem. However, the reptiles here in Texas, North Central Texas, have a way of adapting to the cold temperatures. That actual process is called brumation. Now, brumation is very similar to another process that you may be aware of. What's another process that animals do or go through to escape the winter elements? Okay, migration. Okay, we have some animals, mammals and birds, that will migrate. Okay, what else?
Hibernation.
Hibernation. So this is very similar to hibernation. The only difference is between brumation and hibernation is hibernation essentially is just a deep sleep. They're done. They're out. They're out cold for winter. They get beef up. You know, they get a lot of fat on their body. They grow thick coats of hair and fur, and then they're out. Brumation allows for the animal to actually wake up, come out, emerge, get their food and water if necessary, and then go back to sleep or become, a better word is dormant. They're dormant, not active for the remainder of the winter. So reptiles have that go through that process of brumation. Now, because they're cold-blooded, they're not very active during the winter months. They go through this brumation process, and what allows them to do that are 2 things. First of all, their metabolic rate, their metabolism is lowered, which translates to them having not need for oxygen. Okay, they don't really need much oxygen, so they can submerge themselves. In fact, some turtles around here, box turtles, which I'll show you, actually submerge themselves underground, to the point where, again, very limited amount of oxygen is necessary for them to survive, as well as limited amount of resources such as water and food. And I'll talk about how reptiles can do that. Okay, so we also know they're cold-blooded. They're scaly, and their scales are very important too. And their scales allow them to survive in their habitats as well. Now, you know different various species of reptiles, right? So what I want to do is real quick. I want to create a habitat. We're going to do an aquatic habitat. Okay, we have land. There's some land, and there's water. And I want you to name reptiles and non-reptiles. What kind of reptiles or in other wildlife would you find in an aquatic habitat? Yes, sir.
Turtles.
Okay, so you would have turtles, and like I told the other class, don't laugh at my drawings, okay? Don't laugh at my drawings. Okay, you can laugh at my drawings. I'm just kidding. All right, so here's the feet of the turtle. Here's his tip. Okay, so we got a turtle there. Okay, what else? Yes, ma'am.
Fish.
Fish. We need fish, right? Okay, fish are important. Do little fish, big fish. Okay. Okay, what else? Yes, sir.
Ducks.
Ducks. Knew someone's got to say duck, and I got to draw a duck. Thanks. All right, here's a duck. All right, here's his feet in the back. Okay. What else? I see y'all smirking. Okay. I did tell you not to laugh, but y'all can smirk. Okay. Yes.
Frog.
Frog. Okay, good. So you have aquatic vegetation, like say a lotus pad or a lily pod. So we have a frog here. There's his eye. There's his tongue. Okay. Frog. What else? What else would we be at? Yes. Well, an aquatic habitat here in Fort Worth. But we do have aquatic snakes right here in Fort Worth. So, oh, you guys document my drawings, aren't you? Great. All right. So here's a snake. Okay. In the water. Okay. What else? Reptiles are non. You can do biotic or abiotic items. Biotic meaning living, or abiotic non-living. Yes.
Alligators.
Alligator. All right, you did an alligator. Okay, we'll have an alligator here basking in the sun right here. Okay. This is his tail. Here he is. We'll give him a little Alright, there's an alligator sitting in there. Yes? Leaves. Okay, good. So look at, leaves are falling on the... And what would you normally, if you had leaves or vegetation laying on top of the surface of the water, what else would you find amongst those leaves? What would those leaves, they would serve a purpose for, what purpose would they serve? Yes?
Trees.
Okay, so we have trees that photosynthesize and so forth. But what would be amongst all those leaves? Bugs. Things are going to be hiding in there. So you have a lot of invertebrates, little bugs. I'm just going to do little dots with bugs. You get little whirligigs and insects that are in the water. You have dragonfly nymphs. At the very bottom, we're talking about abiotic items, like say some rocks at the very bottom. And all the little dragonfly nymphs, they hang out near rocks, submerge under rocks. Salamanders, things like that. What else? One more thing, one more item. And notice how, boy, it's heavy up here. There's sky, too. You can do stuff in the sky as well. Yes?
Bird.
Okay, birds, okay? We're just going to do a couple birds there. We'll say it's a hawk, okay? So we know what it is, hawk, okay? Yes?
The sun.
Okay, well, yeah, we need the sun. Okay, there's the sun. All right. All right, let's stop there, okay? How are all these animals connected to each other? How are they connected to each other?
They're alive.
Okay, they're alive, minus the rock, okay, right? They're alive. Yeah, how are they going to be connected to each other? There you go, that's what I was getting at. They're going to be eating, this is we're going to create a food web here. They're interconnected by the predator-prey relationship. So real quickly, what are some relationships or what we would have here? Yes, sir?
The hawk eating the fish.
Yeah, the hawk eating the fish, okay? Okay, what else?
Oh, the alligator eating duck.
Yeah, oh yeah. Alligators love ducks. There you go. Yes, sir.
The frog eating the bugs and the leaves.
Yeah, the frogs eating the bugs on the leaves. Okay, good. What else? Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
The frog eating the little things next to the rock.
Okay, the nymphs. Okay, you definitely eat those dragonfly nymphs.
Fish eating the nymphs.
Fish eating the nymphs. Good job. Yeah, we can't forget about that. Yes, sir.
Alligator eating turtles.
Yes, alligator definitely would eat the turtles. Yes, ma'am.
The little bugs eating the leaves.
Okay, you have the bugs eating the vegetation, any vegetation they may have, so right there. Okay, what else? Yes, sir.
The duck eating the bugs.
Okay, the duck could eat the bugs and the vegetation, definitely. All right. Yes.
Snake eating the small fish.
Snake eating the small fish. Well, that's definitely true. Okay. One more. Yes, sir.
The snake could possibly eat a hawk if it
If it was, there you go, a baby hawk maybe. But it's usually, the snake's not going to really have much interaction with the hawk. Now, how would a snake and a hawk be connected though?
The snake could eat its eggs.
Okay, the snake could eat his eggs if it's a snake, egg-eating snake. Also, think about, say we had a rat over here, a little rat. Here's a little rat. Well, the snake could eat the rat. Snake could eat the rat, and then the hawk eats the rodent. So they're connected in that way. Now, as you can see here, it's a little messy. You have all those arrows facing each other. Notice I have the arrow going towards the animal. That means the energy is going. The fish's energy is going into the hawk. So the hawk is getting all that energy, and that's how all our animals are connected. Okay, reptiles. There's a lot of reptiles here. The fish. Actually, the alligator will eat the fish. It could eat that small rodent. What else could it eat? You could eat that. That's it. You could probably eat that frog too. But what if I did this? Gators go. What happens to the food web? Way more what? Way more prey species, okay? And then I get rid of the hawk. That's a top predator as well. What happens? What happens to the prey species? Go ahead, shout it out.
The prey
starts to overpopulate.
Everything, yeah, they get overpopulate. And that's the important role of reptiles, like alligators and so forth, because they're the top predators in their habitat, in their environment. So if you get rid of the top predators, all those prey species are going to increase, and also the natural resources like the water and the food are going to be diminished, okay? So having a top predator like alligators and so forth keeps the habitat in check. Everything is nice and balanced, okay? That's called a carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is the amount of animals or wildlife, particular wildlife, that can sustain life in a particular habitat. If you get too much above that carrying capacity, there's not going to be natural resources. They're going to outcompete each other. There's not going to be very much left for the other animals. And also, it lowers your biodiversity. What's diversity mean? What's diversity mean?
Different.
Yeah, difference. Okay, so if you have right now with the gator and the hawk and so forth, you have a lot of biodiversity, a lot of different types of wildlife. But if you get rid of some of these predators, then your biodiversity goes down, and then you start having kind of a very limited amount of wildlife. So you have just a few forms of wildlife. And that can be detrimental because the alligator, the hawk, and all these other forms of wildlife play a critical role in the habitat. They have a role, and when you take their role out, then there's going to be some chaos in that environment. So again, that's how they're all connected. Now, speaking of alligators, I brought an alligator for you guys to see. Okay, I'm going to talk about some of his adaptations and what makes him unique and different. Okay, oh, he's jumping. He's ready to see y'all. Okay, now this alligator here is in that aquatic habitat. He likes to live in that aquatic habitat. He does well in that aquatic habitat because he has special adaptations. He has physical traits and behaviors that allows him to survive in that habitat. And that's the thing with wildlife. Wildlife actually have serve a great purpose in the habitats in which they live to help control the balance of that particular habitat. And alligators do that for aquatic habitats. Now, what allows them to survive is, I said earlier that reptiles go through a process called brumation, okay? That allows them to survive the cold months. Well, one of the ways that they can do that is the amount of energy they get from their tail. Now, during the summer months, reptiles, like alligators, they eat, and they eat, and they eat. And then all the fat from that food gets stored up in their tail. So their tail gets really big, fat, okay? So in the winter months, when it gets cold and they're not active anymore, they don't have to hunt, okay? When they're brumating and they're dormant, all the fat from their tail, they can actually convert that to energy and use that to get them through those winter months without having to hunt and look for food. So this guy here is totally adapted, living in aquatic habitats even during the winter, because he can modify his behaviors and be able to survive utilizing that energy and that fat that he gets stored up in his tail. So that's a really cool feature for a cold-blooded animal. Other animals, well, I'll talk about that in a minute, but some of his other cool features about this alligator that allows him to survive in this habitat is, first of all, just the overlying structure of his body. If you notice how he's very streaky. He has a long tail, he can slap things with it, you know, he can float with it, he gives him balance, it's his motor, he can roll along like that. And also, if you look at his head, notice how his eyes sit on top of his head, his nose sits on top of his head. So this guy is, and then he has webbed feet, so this guy is totally designed for living in an aquatic system. So that gets him through those, allows him to swim and survive in an aquatic system. Also, if you look at his lower jaw, you see all these little black dots on his lower jaw. Okay, all those little black dots. All those little black dots are called sensory pits. They're called sensory pits. And inside of those sensory pits, essentially, are nerve endings. So actually, whenever something jumps in the water, creates a ripple, changes the water pressure, he can actually sense those changes in the water pressure, and then go to the source of where something jumped into the water and determine whether or not that's food for him. Now, food for this alligator would be, what we talked about, duck, beavers, deer, fish, turtles, not people, okay, not people. So he can actually sense when the water pressure changes and go to it and with accuracy determine whether or not that's food. So these guys here live in Fort Worth. We have them here in Fort Worth. They're in the Trinity River. They're in Lake Worth. They're in Eagle Mountain Lake. They're actually right at the Nature Center because the West Fork of the Trinity comes right through, bisects our property. So we actually have alligators out here, and this is their habitat. This is a native habitat for them. Some of them are probably brought in and released because, believe it or not, still people, and I don't know if they're familiar with you, did you know anybody who had alligators as a pet when you were young? Yeah, it was a big deal. A lot of people had these when they were kids. But now it's against the law. You're not allowed to have these guys, okay? It's against the law, and that's why we have them. And sometimes people grab them, take them as pets because you can get them when they're really little, and then they release them back in the water. So that's probably where our population comes from, as well as a natural population, because the Trinity River is a 700-mile river that goes all the way down to the Galveston Bay. So everything's connected in that regard. So that's why we have them. In fact, we have an A&M student, A&M Commerce student, who comes out and captures these alligators at the Nature Center and does research on them, measures them. He actually puts a little microchip in them so he can read them. So next time he catches them, he can scan it. Kind of like you go to the store and it scans your items and it shows what it is, what price. Well, he can do that too with the alligators and determine where they live. And that's very essential because if he finds, if this was our aquatic system right here, and he captures all the alligators over here, what does that tell you about this aquatic system? This entire aquatic system? Yes, sir?
Old prey usually goes that way.
I'm sorry?
Old prey usually goes that way.
Yeah, this is really good over here. There's lots of food over here. But what if he just captures them just all over the habitat? What does that tell you?
There's a lot of habitat.
Yeah, the entire habitat's pretty healthy, okay? Or, you know, so it can go all over, okay? So that's very beneficial, all the research, the information we gather from, we call him Gator Joe. From Gator Joe, it's very helpful also to the public because some people don't really want to have alligators living in their neighborhood, okay? So we can at least tell them, well, they're actually off, away from the public. Actually, all the gators that we found are pretty much in solitary areas, in marshy areas, with the occasional one that comes up closer to the river where we are, okay? So, and also their scales are adapted. Their back scales right there, I'm not choking them, I promise you. The back scales are very hard to help protect its body. And then the smooth ones on the belly help him slide in the water whenever he's basking. Now, talking about their role in the environment and their how important they are to different environments. This alligator here, where was I going to go? I forgot. I lost my train of thought. Who wants to see a snake now?
No.
Here, let me real quick touch the gator. Okay, really fast. Now, these animals here used to be endangered. These guys used to be endangered. They were overhunted because people like to get their skins, make belts and boots and different items. But that no longer is, well, the government decided we're going to stop doing that. We're going to protect them. Their population was too low. So through protection, their numbers have actually increased significantly to the point now where they're no longer endangered. In fact, in some states, including Texas, they're hunted. You can hunt these alligators. You have to have a special license. It's a lottery system. I'm going too fast. Up.
Oh.
There you go. All right. So now they're abundant all across the southeast part of the United States. So that's a really good sign of conservation in action, of us protecting these animals so that they don't become threatened, endangered, and then eventually extinct. So the alligators are a really good story when it comes to conservation. All right. The next animal I want to show you is a snake. And talk a little bit about their cool adaptation, because he's got some cool ways to help him survive in light of the absence of the obvious. Legs, feet, ears, eyelids, you name it. All right. This snake here is called a corn snake. Corn snake. Now, corn snake, the reason it's called a corn snake, if you look at his belly resembles Indian corn. Okay, that's where it gets its term corn snake. Now, this corn snake here is non-venomous. I wouldn't be holding it if it was venomous. He is a constrictor. In fact, the story behind this snake is he was actually somebody's pet, and they couldn't take care of it anymore. So now we have it, and we use it for educational programs. Never bitten anybody, never hurt anybody. It's a really great snake. Now snakes are important in our environment, just like the alligators who keep things in check. Well, these snakes actually keep the pets, the rodent population in check. And imagine if we didn't have snakes or anything that ate mice and rodents. We'd be inundated with them. So having these animals here allows us to control pests like rats and rodents and so forth. Now they're adapted to not having legs and feet by having scales that open and close. They can open and close those scales. Also, their body is just all muscle, so it allows them that strength to pull themselves along the ground. So that's very beneficial for the snake. Another one of its cool adaptations, because it doesn't have hands to cut his food up or whatever, he swallows his food whole. And he does that with many different features. First of all, he can detach that jaw, open that jaw up really wide so he can create more surface area, as well as his lower jawbone splits like this. Okay, so that gives him more area. He has a big mouth. Okay, if you had a snake mouth, your mouth would start way back on your neck and go all the way around your chin, all the way back to your neck. So when you open your mouth wide, it'd probably be down this far. Okay, so have a big mouth, split lower jaw, detach their jawbone, and also, even more importantly, once it's swallowing its food, his ribs, all along his body are ribs. Just rib all the way around, and a backbone. As the mouse or rodent's going down his mouth, his throat, his ribs actually move. They'll move. So as it comes down, he kind of opens it up, gets space, it goes down, and then closes it off, and it works its way down. So this guy is specially adapted to survive in the habitat in which he is, and the lifestyle that this snake has to have. Okay? All right. Any questions about some of the things I've been talking about? Reptiles, characteristics, how they're interconnected with each other. Any natural history or questions you have about alligators or snakes? Because we have less than 5 minutes, and we'll make sure you get some of your questions answered if in fact you have some. Anything you want to know about snakes or alligators or just wildlife, reptiles in particular, and how they are connected and what role they play in our environments. Anybody have any questions before I move around with the snake? Yes, sir.
If you get swallowed, if a human gets swallowed whole by a snake, will he still be able to like live inside the snake?
Well, there's not any snake around here that's going to be swallowing anybody, but if you were to do that, then no, you would be consumed. So just like anything, it's going to break down whatever it eats. So you're done. But there's no snakes around here. Don't have to worry about that. Because they're only going to eat things that pretty much are about the size of their head or just a little bit bigger than their head. Because if they can't swallow it, then they're going to have an issue. In fact, I had a snake probably twice the size of this, and I gave him a rat. And he was eating that rat, and I just saw his skin just spread wide. I'm like, oh no, I hope, because I've actually seen footage of snakes who've eaten prey that's too big, they literally just explode. Okay? Yeah, there's a thought that you have in your mind before lunch. So they're only going to consume things that are about the size of their head or a little bit bigger. I mean, that's just a general rule. Yes, ma'am.
And remember, we were in a boat and we saw a water moccasin. It was trying to eat catfish that was bigger than that.
A lot of snakes actually they'll try to get eat something and realize, wait a minute, that's just too big. So even snakes have their limitations. Okay, last question. Yes, ma'am.
Are there snakes though that like around the world that can eat?
Anacondas are huge. Okay, an anaconda is almost like 30 feet long. It can be. I mean, the heads are huge. So if it's like this big, you can imagine it can open really wide. I've seen anacondas that eat small, caimans and alligators, crocodilians, and so forth. So they have the capabilities of doing that because of those adaptations. Okay. All right. For the sake of time, I'm not going to walk around with the snake, but I'll stand by the door so when you're walking out, you can touch the snake on your way out. And then wash your hands in your next class. Hopefully you have some of this in your next class, so you can do that. Any last questions? We have like 2 minutes. Yes?
What do you think about having something like a bearded dragon for a pet?
That's fine. I know a lot of people have bearded dragons for pets, and that's a really good pet. This snake here, if you happen to get a snake as a pet, a corn snake is a great snake for a pet. If you want another reptile, like you want a turtle, I would encourage you to get a land turtle because they're easier to maintain than an aquatic turtle because you have to get filters and pumps and it gets messy. But a land turtle is a good one to have. So yeah, sure. There's lots of really cool reptiles you can have as pets.
When a snake swallows something bigger, does it have to like slither to get it into its mouth?
Well, what it just slowly works. It opens its mouth as wide as it can, and then the muscles just work its way down. If it's too big, I've seen snakes just spit it back up. Like, okay, that's too much, you know, more than I can swallow. But it's amazing how elastic stretch, you know, their skin is. So they can stretch pretty good, but you know, you have to be very, very careful. Yes.
For the alligator, is that just like a baby, or is that how big it's gonna be?
That is a baby alligator. On average, alligators in Texas are about 10 to 12 feet long, and the longest alligator at the nature center was 11 feet long. So that was a baby, probably born this past or last spring. Okay, this past spring. So that's still pretty small. It still has its markings as a juvenile, those little yellow stripes on it to help it to blend in. So yeah, so it can get up to about 10 to 12 feet. Longest one on record was in Louisiana, 19 feet 2 inches long. So they can get really big if given the proper habitat and size. Alrighty, well guys, thank you so much. Hopefully you learned a little bit. I know you'll be learning a whole lot more about reptiles. Hopefully that gives you just kind of an introduction to some of the reptiles and their roles.
Miss Paris.
Got it? Okay.